Hey everyone, in today's video I wanted to go over my Blair Backdraft build, which is basically the firearm build. And this build solely focuses on the firearm aspect of Backdraft. In this build we use the first, second and fourth skills along with the passive, and we do not use the third skill, Burn Taste. This first skill spews fire and creates a flame zone on the ground, and enemies standing in the flame zone take continuous damage and are inflicted with burn. We use this skill to generate the flame zones on the ground, which allows us to benefit from our Pitmaster passive, and this skill basically just creates a flame zone on the ground and it starts to fill up our passive that is on the right. And to gain the full benefits of this passive we need 5 stacks. And to gain 5 stacks we use our fourth and our first. The fourth skill creates a giant fireball that explodes. This deals damage, but the main part that we want to focus on is the fireball splitting into multiple smaller fireballs, and these smaller fireballs create flame zones on the ground, which allows us to gain our Pitmaster passive faster. And this skill creates 3 small fireballs, which means we gain 3 flame zones on the ground. So we can use this skill to gain 3 flame zones, and then we can combine it with our first and just spam the first skill twice instead of just spamming the first skill 5 times. And then once we have 5 flame zones on the ground, as you can see when I use my fourth skill, it will throw a fireball forward and it will split into 3 smaller fireballs, and each fireball creates a flame zone, and that allows me to get 3 flame zone stacks. And then all I simply do is spam the first skill twice, then I'm up to 5 stacks. When we do have 5 flame zones on the ground, we then use our second skill, Extinguish, and whenever we do this, we gain the Power of Fire buff. And this Power of Fire buff, the main ones we're focusing on is the Weakpoint damage increase and the firearm attack increase. This is 6% and 5%, and we gain 5 stacks of each. So if we have 5 flame zones on the ground and we use the skill, we instantly gain the 5 stacks of Power of Fire, and that results in us having the 30% Weakpoint damage increase and the 25% firearm attack increase. And for the passive, you see that we have critical hit damage increase of 10% and then critical hit rate increase per flame zone. So to gain the critical damage increase of 10%, the enemy has to be on fire and inflicted with the burn effect. This will allow you to gain the 10% firearm critical hit damage increase. And then for the critical hit rate increase, you get this whenever you have a flame zone on the ground up to 5 stacks, which means you gain a 25% increase on your firearm critical hit rate, as long as you have 5 flame zones on the ground. For the actual modules, we use Backdraft, as this changes your Extinguish skill along with your Pitmaster skill. As you can see, the Pitmaster has skill critical hit rate instead of firearm critical hit rate, and Extinguish only does skill power modifier. But when we have Backdraft on, we gain Weakpoint damage increase and firearm attack increase. And then for Pitmaster, we gain the critical hit rate and the critical hit damage. That is why we use this mod. And then for the other modules, we want cooldown and duration. We want the cooldown so we can spam our first, which allows us to gain the stacks of flame zone faster. So the modules we use for that is Nimble Fingers and MP conversion, along with 2 focus mods, Focus on Fire and Focus on Dimension. This allows us to gain the max skill cooldown that we can. And then we have 3 duration mods, Maximize Duration for the plus 40%, Skill Extension for the plus 36.5, and Battle of Stamina for the 8.8. And this allows us to increase the duration of Flame Zone, which means we can have the Flame Zone on the ground for longer, meaning that we have the Pitmaster buff for longer as well. This duration also increases how long we have the Power of Fire buff as well, which allows us to deal damage for longer. And then for the damage modules, we use Shot Focus for the firearm attack increase and Walk a Tightrope for the firearm attack increase. Then we use Conditional Recharge to lower our health so that we can proc Walk a Tightrope, and that allows us to deal the max amount of damage with this build. For the components, we use Annihilation Set, as this gives us a plus 26% to our firearm attack whenever our HP is 50% or lower. Obviously, the lower health we have, the more benefit we gain from this. The stats we want is MP recovery out of combat, max HP, max MP, MP recovery in combat, defense, MP recovery modifier, shield recovery modifier, and max shield. And then for the reactor, the weapon mounting doesn't matter since we're not using skills, and the skill power boost doesn't matter either. The only thing that matters is the sub stats, and the ones that you want is skill cooldown and skill duration. So I could even take this Toxic Mechanics reactor just for the skill cooldown and skill duration, and this allows me to decrease the cooldown of my skills and increase the duration of my flame zones along with the Power of Fire buff as well. So with the extra duration I went from 38.2 to 40.3, so that is a 2.1 second increase. So whenever I use Extinguish, I have the Power of Fire buff for 40 seconds, which allows me to deal the increased damage for 40 seconds. Some notes for this build is that having more than 5 flame zones doesn't offer any additional benefits. All you need is 5 flame zones. So obviously my damage regularly, 405,000. You can then spam your first skill or use your fourth skill to gain the 3 flames. That will give you 3 flame zones. Then you can just spam your first 2 times to increase it all the way up to 5 flame zones. And you'll obviously deal more damage if the enemy is burning. But all you need is 5 flame zones. And then you simply use your extinguish skill, which is your second. And that will give you the buff on the left, which is your power of fire. But you can only collect 5 stacks. That's why having only 5 flame zones is the best possible way to play this build. You can also keep this buff up as long as you have flame zones. You just simply have to just press the skill. And then once you have 5 stacks of each, you just shoot the enemy and you deal the increased damage. And obviously your weapons are really important for this build. And the weapons I'm using right now is the Greg's Reversed Fate and the Enduring Legacy. For the Greg's Reversed Fate, I'm using Weakpoint damage, firearm attack, bonus firearm attack against Colossus, and firearm critical hit damage. And these are the modules that I'm using. And then Enduring Legacy, I'm using firearm critical hit damage, bonus firearm attack against Colossus, weak point damage, and firearm attack, and these are the modules that I'm using. And now we can go do some demonstrations on Devourer and Gluttony. In the description I'll have a link to my document that goes over this build as well, what effects each skill does and why we use them, along with the components and the reactor. I didn't include any math for this one because I feel like I'm taking way too much time calculating everything and not enough time actually making videos and playing the game. So going forward I'm probably not going to do that as much, but I might do separate videos that are slightly smaller than these types of videos. If you found the video helpful, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, it'd really help the channel a lot. I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.